Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on February 9th, 2026. Washington neocons love to brag about U.S. military assets being locked and loaded, but Donald Trump is now so scandalized that he's mocked and loaded. How will the scandals engulfing Donald Trump affect his decisions with respect to Iran? To explore this vitally important question, we've invited back onto Reason to Resist Dr. Foad Izadi. Dr. Izadi is an associate professor at the Department of American Studies, Faculty of World Studies, University of Tehran, where he teaches MA and PhD courses in American Studies. His research and teaching interests are interdisciplinary and focus on U.S.-Iran relations and U.S. public diplomacy. Thank you very much for coming back onto our program, Dr. Izadi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Izadi, Donald Trump claims that Iran wants to make a deal. In fact, he seems to be suggesting that Iran is desperate to make a deal. However, in recent comments to Iranian television, an Iranian lawmaker, Mahmoud Nabavian, offered a very different account of the talks between the United States and Iran. He claimed that through a back channel, the Trump regime indicated to the Iranian government that it wanted permission to strike two targets in Iran and that that would be the end of it. Mr. Nabavian also said that Iran categorically rejected the offer and warned that it would inflict thousands of casualties on U.S. forces if they attacked Iran at all. So, Dr. Izadi, what is your assessment of the talks between the United States and Iran? In your view, where do they currently stand?
The United States wants to normalize attacking Iran. They attacked Iran in June, in the middle of negotiations. The idea of having a limited attack on Iran is as illegal as having a bigger attack on Iran. You're not supposed to attack other countries. We have a mechanism at the United Nations. If you can pass a UN resolution at the UN Security Council, putting a country under Article 43 of the UN Charter, then use of force is permitted. Otherwise, it's against international law to attack other countries. In fact, it is against international law to threaten other countries. The language is threat or use of force. So when you hear Trump threatening to attack Iran every other day, he's violating international law. And U.S. is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Of course, Iran is not the first country that they're violating international law when it comes to military confrontation. With regard to the talks, we have very few people in Iran that are optimistic, given the nature of the Trump regime, given the influence of the Israeli lobby. And as you know, Netanyahu is going to Washington in just a few hours. I think they're coordinating their efforts. Last time, Trump said that they worked as a team, and I don't think that has changed. I think they are planning together. There are some benefits in engaging in this type of talks with Iran for internal use. Right now, the US public opinion is against a military confrontation with Iran. If Trump can claim that we exhausted diplomatic venues, then that may be useful for both public opinion and also the US Congress. We have this War Powers Act, and if the assessment is that attacking Iran would be costly, then you are going to have members of the US Congress asking the president to come and get permission for a military confrontation with Iran. Right now, we have a good number of people in the US Congress that oppose going into a military confrontation with Iran. We have a good number of people in the US Congress who support attacking Iran militarily. And then we have some people in between. So engaging in some level of diplomatic exchange with Iran would help this third group to come on board. This is, I guess, the calculation. So the idea in Iran is that if the problem with the United States, the problem that US had with Iran was Iran's nuclear program, there was no reason for Trump to leave the nuclear agreement, because under the agreement you had the most exhaustive inspections of Iranian sites, and Iran was not allowed to enrich uranium more than 3.5%. And we don't have any nuclear scientist anywhere that would claim you can make a nuclear bomb with just enriching 3.5%. You need more than 90%. So the best way to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon would be to have the nuclear agreement of 2015 or something similar to it. But I don't think the US government officials are worried about Iran's nuclear program. Otherwise, they would return to that nuclear agreement. I think the aim is to balkanize Iran, to overthrow the Iranian government. They tried in January orchestrating, in their opinion, some sort of a color revolution, which failed. We had Mossad agents, according to Mike Pompeo, who was the former CIA director, roaming Iranian streets, engaging in all types of illegal activities. So overall, people are quite pessimistic. And even if you have an agreement with Trump under the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, which was passed in 2015, the US government, the executive branch, needs to present whatever agreement they have with Iran to the US Congress for a vote. And given the fact that the US Congress is Israeli occupied territory, it would be very hard for these people to have any level of sanctions relief on Iran. So even if there is an agreement with the executive branch in the United States, people don't expect a lot of sanctions relief at the end of the day, because these sanctions laws are passed by the US Congress. And if they are to be lifted, then they would need to agree. And in the last number of years, during the Biden administration especially, they have codified a lot of these sanction laws. So they have limited the ability of the US president to even suspend many sanctions. So overall, I think the US hostilities towards Iran will continue. Iran will continue to resist. In 2 days, we have the 47th anniversary of the victory of the 1979 revolution. There is this culture of resistance in Iran. We are used to American aggression, and I think we will survive. We will survive Trump, and we will survive the next presidents as they come, the same way Iran has survived in the last 47 years.
So, as you mentioned, Netanyahu is on his way to Washington. This will actually be his sixth trip since Trump returned to the White House in January of last year. I don't recall a period in my life when a foreign leader visited the United States, any foreign leader ever, 6 times in about a year. That's extraordinary. And on his way out the door from his office in Israel, his office clarified or stressed that the message they are going to deliver to Trump is that any deal with Iran has to include restrictions on its missile program and its support for the axis of resistance. Publicly, the Iranian government has been adamant that it will not negotiate those two issues. Do you think there is any prospect of a deal if the Trump regime insists that Iran accept restrictions on its missile program and abandon the axis of resistance?
You know, what they want Iran to do is to limit its ballistic missiles range to 300 kilometers, which means that the idea they have is that they want all the information about Iran's nuclear facilities so they can more accurately target them whenever they want. And they want Iran not to be able to hit Tel Aviv and Haifa if Iran is attacked again, because if you limit Iran's ballistic missiles to 300 kilometers, Iranian missiles will end up in Iraq somewhere. they would not reach their targets. And it would be foolish for any Iranian politician to leave the country defenseless, especially when Iran is facing two nuclear armed states, regimes, to be more accurate. And this is not going to be acceptable to Iran. There are some ideas, some regional countries like Qatar, Egypt, Turkey have presented, for example, Iran signing an agreement to not to use these missiles as first strike, not to attack Israel or US bases unless Iran is attacked. So these type of things, I think, can be done. Iran is not interested in a military confrontation, but agreeing to limit Iran's ballistic missiles range means that the country would become defenseless. And, whatever agreement you have, you would need to verify that agreement. So if Iran accepts any limitation on its missile program, then the next request Americans and Israelis will have is they need to come in and inspect Iranian missile sites to see whether all missiles are under this or that range or not. They need to look at the missiles and make a determination. This is what Saddam Hussein did. He opened the country to all types of inspections, thinking that by allowing Westerners to visit anywhere they want in Iraq, they would allow him to continue his rule. And, the United States attacked Iraq once they made sure they don't have weapons of mass destruction, because, they need to make sure that these type of attacks are generally cost-free. So Saddam is not a role model for Iran's foreign policy, neither is Libya. We realize what happens when you cooperate with genocidal regimes, and Iranian leaders are intelligent enough not to do that.
Mm-hmm. The smart move seems to me would be, or a smart move would be to say to the Americans, look, we'll give up our enrichment program if Israel gives up its nukes and its own capacity to enrich uranium. Of course, Israel and the United States would categorically reject that offer, I'm sure, but it wouldn't help their image globally if that were to be put on the table. Is that a position that the Iranian government, to your knowledge, has ever taken in discussions with the United States, that we want the entire region of West Asia to be a nuclear-free zone, and if Israel is willing to do that, we'll do it as well?
For the last 30 years, Iran has been saying that. Maybe they should say it more often, because if you haven't heard it, that means they have not done a good job mentioning this enough. But the idea of a Middle East free zone, nuclear-free zone, was actually presented by Iran more than 30 years ago, and all countries accepted that idea, because we don't have any country in this part of the world with nuclear weapons, with the exception of Israel. I think that's an idea that can be presented again, and maybe I send a clip of our talk to some of the people in foreign ministry, so they remember they need to do a better job expressing this idea internationally.
Well, the problem we have here in the West, Dr. Izadi, as I'm sure you know, is that the corporate media don't even acknowledge the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. And they never talk about the fact that Israel is the only state in West Asia that is not a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, as Iran is. It is a member, albeit with a strained relationship with, Mr. Grossi and the IAEA. In any case, it does seem to me, and I'm not offering advice to the Iranian government. I'm sure they don't need my advice. That the more the Iranian government talks about this, the more people in the West will be prompted to recall and to consider the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. This genocidal regime has nuclear weapons. So my own view, and I try to talk about it as much as I can on this program, is that highlighting the existence of those weapons and the extreme danger to humanity, not just to Iran, but to humanity, of a genocidal regime having a nuclear arsenal is a good thing and something we ought to do, all of us, not just the Iranian government, as frequently as possible. In any case, I'd like to ask you a bigger question about the motivation of the Iranian government for negotiating at all with these people. You know, as the IAEA confirmed during the first Trump administration, Iran was complying with the JCPOA, the Obama era nuclear deal. The United States withdrew anyways. Um, we're talking here about two governments, two regimes that are capable of violating any principle of humanity, any law, any norm of human decency. And they've shown that they are completely treacherous when it comes to negotiations. And I'm referring here particularly to the fact that last summer, when Iran evidently believed that the Americans were engaging them in good faith in negotiations, Israel was actually preparing to attack Iran and did attack Iran. And the characters, or the one of the principal characters who was involved in this deception, was none other than Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's Middle East envoy. So when you add up all of the history of these tortuous negotiations, um, I find it difficult to understand why Iran would trust these people at all and why they would even engage with them in a negotiation. I have my own ideas about why they might be doing that, but I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. What do you think the Iranian government hopes to achieve by talking to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner?
We have a reformist government in place. Iran's president ran on the idea of negotiating with the United States. This is what reformists generally think about when it comes to US. We go and negotiate and we reason with them, and they generally fail. Yes, but apparently Iranian people are generally peaceful. Uh, uh, they don't like military confrontation, and when uh, presidential candidates, talk about peace on earth, uh, they get votes, and when they come into office, they follow through with those election slogans. Uh, Sometimes we wonder the same way you do, because given the fact that um, Kushner is an Israeli. Uh, he, Netanyahu used to visit his house when he was the Israeli ambassador uh, to the UN in New York in the 80s. And Kushner grew up with Netanyahu. His father was a friend of Netanyahu. And Netanyahu has said this many times, that he used to sleep in Kushner's bedroom when he was visiting the family. He would stay overnight, and I don't know if he slept in the same bed with Kushner or not, but he was saying that he was in the same bedroom, and they're still in the same bed. They haven't left the bed. Witkoff used to raise money for the Israeli army before he became Trump's point man on Iran and Gaza. During the Biden administration, once Biden limited some military shipments to Israel, Biden had asked Netanyahu not to invade Rafah, the southern part of Gaza Strip. Netanyahu had invaded anyway. So they limited, just some symbolic limitation on sending some uh, heavy weapons to Israel. And Witkoff, he wasn't in the government at that time, obviously. He organized fundraising events for the Israeli army uh, using, the Zionist circles in New York to basically raise money for the genocide. So this type of activities are very much available in open source data. And I think the Iranian government wants to give peace a chance, the last chance probably. They are not interested in a military confrontation, and they want to make sure that they have exhausted all diplomatic venues. And at the end of the day, you may have a war. And I think this time the Iranian leaders are going to respond in a much more severe manner. Last time we had no US casualties. I think this time the calculation is at least 500 US casualties, which is sad. These are young people with young families. They shouldn't be going back to the United States in body bags, but that is why the government is negotiating to make sure that the Trump administration would, they want to see whether they would take the last opportunity they have to avert war.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're expecting Iran to have total surrender or give up defensive weapons, that's not going to happen. Iran is a very old country. We have survived many aggressors in many, many centuries, and will manage to survive Trump.
Now, on January 30th, the United States Department of Justice released over 3 million pages of documents relating to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And every day, sometimes multiple times a day since then, since the 9 days that have elapsed, 10 days that have elapsed, there have been more and more revelations, shocking revelations about Jeffrey Epstein's connections to Trump, about his deep ties to Israel, about the horrific criminality of the powerful men who surrounded Jeffrey Epstein, not just of himself, but people who are titans of American industry and important figures in Western politics. I could name them all. I'm sure you know some of those names. I'm curious to know, Dr. Izadi, how this is viewed from Iran, and what is the discourse, particularly in the Iranian media, around the Epstein scandal? What is the view about how that might affect Donald Trump's decisions with respect to Iran?
There is this question in Iran that why has the United States government given the Iranian portfolio to Netanyahu, because it seems this is what Trump has done. And I think the only concern Trump has is whether he's going to lose American soldiers for domestic reasons, not because he cares about human lives, but because of political ramifications. And if Netanyahu manages to convince him that attacking Iran would be relatively cost-free, then other types of planning would be basically Netanyahu's decision. This is why he's visiting Washington so often. They're talking about Iran. I don't think they're really discussing other issues that much. They don't have to be physically present to do other things. And why has Trump done that? So one theory is that it's because of the Epstein files, because Epstein was a Mossad agent, and he has filmed Trump extensively, violating basically raping little girls. And I don't think Trump wants uh, these videos to be released. Um, Trump used to say he's interested in America first. And in the last year, since he has been president, he has been doing Israel first when it comes to US policy in the Middle East. So why has he done that? Epstein files may be a major reason. There could be other things, the Israeli lobby, donations, Kushner, but these things, the Israeli lobby donates to American presidents all the time. This overdoing of uh, being subservient to Israeli prime ministers is unique to Trump. And one reason could be the Epstein files. In Islamic culture, these type of things are, of course, in all cultures, this type of activities is very, very much against conscience of people. In Islamic culture, these are more conservative areas of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this news that we are reading in Iran on the level of inhumanity that the Epstein class, I think this is the right terminology, politicians in United States, in Europe, in our part of the world, we have some of these princes and kings that have been frequenting Epstein's islands and houses. It's really disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows the problem that humanity faces. We are dealing with genocidal people, whether they engage in genocide or support genocide, but overall genocidal people who have no ethical limitations. They engage in anything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very sad story for in the history of human beings.
Mm-hmm. And a great challenge for us all, including those in the West. I'd like to conclude our discussion today, Dr. Izadi, by talking about political and economic conditions in Iran now. First of all, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, have there been any significant protests in the country as far as you're able to discern?
None in the last month. We have had no riots. You wouldn't get that. I was watching BBC television. We had about 100 monarchists in Washington demonstrating. They're asking United States to attack their country. People in Iran don't understand these people. And then BBC was covering that. I think it was the third news of the day yesterday. I was watching this yesterday morning. And they were covering it in a way that, the sentences, when you were watching the news, quote unquote news, you would think that there are demonstrations in Iran today and they're demonstrating in support of what is going on today. No demonstrations for the last month, no riots. Iran has been very peaceful. We had 2 nights of heavy activities. When I say heavy, less than 1% of the population, about maybe not even less than 1%. We had in the whole country, maybe 50, 60,000 people showed up. And these are generally monarchists. We had bigger numbers early on, but once people realized that Mossad has taken over these protests, people who may not like the government, but they realize that if Netanyahu and Trump take over country, Iran is not going to be in a better shape. The average IQ in Iran is no less than the average IQ in Canada. So people realize that Trump is very much interested in Iran, but he's interested in Iranian oil and he's interested in having Israel dominate this part of the world. He's not interested in the well-being of Iranians. And overwhelming majority of people realize that. That's why you saw about a month ago, huge demonstrations in Iran. Millions of people showed up. The anniversary of the revolution is in 2 days. You'll see a repetition of that. Millions of people will show up. Many of these people have economic difficulties. Sanctions hurt ordinary citizens, but they realize that the problems of Iran can be fixed internally, and they realize that people who engage in genocide are not interested in human rights issues.
I've seen numerous media outlets in the West, for example, The Guardian, claim that the death toll from these riots was as high as 30,000 or possibly even more. To your knowledge, Dr. Izadi, what is the best estimate of the number of people who actually died in these altercations?
We lost over 300 policemen. They were not allowed, they were armed, but they were not allowed to defend themselves. The idea that this reformist government had was that they realized that the other side wants to increase the number of dead people, so they find some excuse to attack Iran. This is what they did in Libya. Initially, the police couldn't defend themselves. And once they were able to defend themselves, the other side casualty was about 600. And then you had about 2,100 people who were shot by the other side. So this is what they would do. They would go to shops and they would say that Pahlavi has said that today is supposed to be general strike. And if the shopkeeper refused to close shop, they would kill that person. So we are dealing with fascists. I don't know if you have seen, you're in Montreal?
Yes.
You said?
Yes.
Okay. Some of these monarchists are in Montreal. You might have heard of maybe 50 people coming to demonstrations.
Yeah, Dr. Izadi, sorry to interrupt you. I actually went to a protest, one of those protests, and interviewed people there.
Did you see Israeli flags?
Not only did I see Israeli flags, the organizer of this protest told me that he was a big fan of Israel and that everything being said about Israel is a propaganda campaign, and that he loved Donald Trump, and there were pictures of the son of the Shah all over the place. They were chanting his name. I did a long report about this. I actually was quite astonished at the level of support for Trump, Netanyahu, and the Shah, the son of the Shah.
And these people are fascists. The father of this man was a fascist. His grandfather was a fascist, and they killed people. One of the reasons we had a revolution was because Iran was number one in terms of killing of political prisoners during the Shah's time. You look at the old Amnesty International reports; they would rank countries, and Shah was number one in terms of political suppression. So this is the situation that we have, that they killed a lot of ordinary citizens. What the government did here was they published all the names of the people who were killed, everybody, police, citizens, and the total number was over 3,000, 3,100, something like that. And all these claims of bigger numbers, some people have said 5,000, they were increasing these numbers to basically invite Trump to attack Iran. And this was the idea. And some of these Western media outlets, they were citing, they were saying this is a US-based human rights organization. But if you looked at the name and Googled the name, you would see this is a Pahlavi propaganda organization. They would, they were calling themselves human rights, but they were actually Pahlavi organization. And being US based doesn't mean you are telling the truth. Trump is US based. He's saying a lie every day. Just being US based doesn't mean anything.
Right.
This is so Iran experienced an actual war, a propaganda war, economic war, psychological war. So the country is suffering a lot.
Thank you very much for the enlightening conversation today, Dr. Izadi. Please stay safe, and we look forward to having you on the program again sometime in the future.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.